Right. Thanks so much, John. I appreciate the accolades there. We all work together very closely. So I've also been asked basically to help expedite rather the presentations here. So go ahead and bustle up and ready, and here we go. Next slide, please. Here's a quick agenda. Next slide. All right, so the district overview, the Walla district has two sets of boundaries. We have, first of all, a civil works, which focuses on the Snake River drainage basin, to include a small part of the Columbia River, basically with McNary Dam and its pool, and basically on up. The other piece of it is also the regulatory. So we have, as a district, we have managed the regulatory activities of this for the state of Idaho. Of significance here within the dams that we have is Dworshak Dam. It's a 717-foot tall. It's the 24th tallest dam in the world, the third tallest dam in the United States, and tallest gravity dam in the U.S. It's the second tallest in the world, second to a facility there in Switzerland. Anyway, that's some of the advertising points there that they always like me to put out. So next slide. Right there. Thank you very much. That's kind of a quick pick there of where we are. So when I talk to different people, you say, okay, what do we cover? Sorry about that. It's really not a particular political boundaries or anything like that. Basically, it's a watershed. So if you take a look all the way out to the right, you see with Wyoming, touching into that with the Jackson Hole area, and all the way basically downstream down to McNary, Umatilla, Washington. I'm sorry, that's Umatilla, as in Oregon. So we manage operations of three major river systems consisting of 94 miles on the Columbia, 140 miles on the Snake, and 2 miles on the Clearwater, which basically leads up to Dworshak. Operate and maintain 8 dams, which 6 have multi-purpose hydro and navigation facilities, and 3 provide flood damage reduction reservoirs. We also have federal levee system recreation sites and operated and maintained. For hydropower, the Corps is the nation's largest hydropower producer, and we can produce power for over 10 million homes. Walla is, of course, second largest power producer, with putting out 4,400 megawatts, and we provide enough electricity to provide approximately 1/3 of the residential customers in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. Of course, navigation is a big piece, pushing through right now about 3 billion transits through the dam systems. Recreation, where I think we're second, it jockeys back and forth between national parks, but we have about 8.2 million visitors per year. And of course, that engages with jobs too. The district is engaged globally with expeditions that are out there. Currently had about, we have folks that are out in Iraq and Afghanistan, and down, of course, in the flood and the hurricane zones as well. Next slide. Operate $50 to $65 million fish program annually. Fish, if they're from the local area in the Pacific Northwest, you're very familiar with what's going on with the fish in the Columbia River, in particular the Snake River systems. We're not going to dive too much into that, but we do place a lot of focus in that. Next slide. Future anticipated funding constraints. We're looking for our O&M program, basically at the project level. And excuse me one second. Anyway, the O&M project level is generally flat. Most of our funds coming through the Bonneville Power Administration, about 50% of our appropriations are funding activities through that agency. The Columbia Fish Mitigation or River Fish Mitigation Fund is expected to decline. And so now so we saw a surge of that in the last several years. And now that we're accomplishing those projects, those are tailoring off quickly. Next slide. Hydro trends. The big news here is really the McNary project that we have going on with the turbine replacement. But currently, that's a long-term project over the course of about 10 or 12 years. Contract was awarded a year or two ago. And they're currently under design and basically prototyping the different projects in there. Here's a big piece of that. We have a lot of upgrades that are going on. You'll see in the slides later on. There's a lot of support equipment too that goes in with all these upgrades, in particular with McNary. So not on the big projects, opportunities for primes, especially the turbines, but when we get into all the supplemental type pieces of it, you'll see that there's opportunities. Next slide, please. Next slide. Generator repair contract coming up. It's a MATOC. You'll see that on our listing as well. That's going to be issued out this year. A MATOC, of course, is multiple award task order contract. That'll be out throughout the region, throughout the Northwestern Division. We're going to have some general construction, a lot of crane. So Omaha District has put out a regional contract with crane, and they basically have maxed out the capacity on that. So we're basically in the process of putting up another one here to satisfy. A&E support contracts, you'll see on the schedule that those are coming up here in FY 21, actually 22 to 23. Next slide. Okay, this is where it's going to get speedy here. So the types of projects that you see here, in particular, going on to the actual next facility with Granite, will be all very similar. So what I want you to take a look at is life safety, fire alarm systems. You're going to see this being repeated on the other slides as well. By the way, I'll put in a pitch here again. These opportunities are all under the contracting opportunities sheet, which is a Microsoft Excel. It provides much more detail and information on each of these projects, and it's available on the Walla District website, as previously mentioned before. Next slide. Florida Granite. Talk about the blade sleeve upgrades, trash rack cranes, rack. We have another contract that's coming in that's out there for actually fabrication of these types of racks that are out there. The turbine maintenance platform, you're going to see that in a couple of different places. And then down for general construction, which we have very little of, but you get into basically an office type of a deal down there in Clarkston. Next slide. Again, you start seeing things like headgate repair pits. Here's one that's kind of more unique, powerhouse roof replacements coming back up. Again, you'll see the trash rack, you'll see the life safety. And here's where we get into that support equipment, the DC system, the low voltage switch gear. These are all things that are basically you're going to see throughout each of the different facilities. Next slide. And hopefully you see the trend here that's going on. You see a bunch of things in there with turbine, head gates, DC, trash rack, bridges, scroll case repairs, and cables. So the Lower Monumental this year, we actually had some potential failures, near misses, if you will, and we're responding really quick with that with the guide wall cables. Next slide for Ice Harbor. Again, you'll see gantry cranes, powerhouse, annunciations, navlock gates. These are all things that are consistent with each of these projects that is typical. Next slide. This is where the most of the money is being pushed into right now as far as this facility. And again, as you look through those, you'll see that the different type of projects that are going on. Next slide. Getting back to the district headquarters here with the Mill Creek area, we've got a landscaping improvements contract. I think that's going to go under 8A. We also have a dive services contract coming up here. I think the schedule shows it was going to be issued this month. I think that's probably going to be pushed out another 3 to 6 months for that contract to go into place. And then for the Tri-Cities area, the Clover Island Restoration Project. Next slide. Okay, as Chris mentioned earlier on the first presentation, this is basically a screenshot of what we got going on from my webpage. When you take a look at that, where that big red arrow is at, and you download that, that's a current spreadsheet of opportunities, and it'll give you the listing, of course, in Microsoft Excel, and you're free to organize that, sort through it, search it, whatever you want to do. I'm providing as much information as we have, hopefully to help you be in position to team with other folks and or maybe look for trying to figure out ways to fill up your bid and proposal pipeline. Next slide. All right, there's our points of contacts. You'll have that information. My name's on the bottom. The district small business page right there is with the little yellow star next to that. And of course, on the top, I have our Chief of Programs Management and our Chief of Contracting. As I transition to the last slide, I'll just say that, next slide, please. There you go. Thank you. Walla Walla is primarily a civil works district. And with that, we don't do a lot of vertical, your traditional type of construction that you would think that the Seattle, Kansas City, and the Omaha districts have. Very similar in nature to the type of work that the Portland district has, being civil works. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and transition with an introduction to my esteemed colleague, Carol McIntyre, who has been a great resource and a mentor to me from the Portland district. Carol, up to you.